Are you a real estate investor looking to elevate your income, freedom, and lifestyle? If so, optimize your daily performance by downloading our free guide, Raising the Bar, 5 Steps to Elevate Your Habits at elevatepod.com. In this guide, created by yours truly, you'll learn why you do what you do, how to easily institute cues in your environment to trigger desired behavior, directly applicable steps to create a fulfilling future, and much more. Get your free copy now at elevatepod.com and kickstart your new habits today. Your future self will thank you.
Welcome to Elevate, the masterclass where we dissect the elements of exceptional achievement and lifestyle design with a focus on personal growth and real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Elevate Nation, welcome back. This is Tyler Chesser. I'm so thankful to have you here, and I am blessed and grateful to be sitting with Alex Jarbo today. Today, you're going to learn about short-term rentals, the case for short-term rentals. You're also going to learn about new development. You're going to expand your thinking from a multidisciplinary perspective, whether you're an investor in short-term rentals, whether you want to be an investor in short-term rentals, or whether you're an investor in real estate in another capacity and are designing a beautiful life. Today's episode is awesome. And I'm telling you right now, it's a ton of fun. Elevate Podcast is all about mindset, mind expansion, and personal development for high-performing real estate investors. I'm your host, Tyler Chesser, and I'm a professional real estate investor and high-performance coach. It is my job to decode the stories, habits, and multifaceted expertise of world-class investors and other experts to help you elevate your performance and lifestyle. Are you ready to take it to another level? It is time. Let's raise the bar today. And I want to thank you so much for being here. If it's your first time listening to Elevate Podcast, welcome. You are important to us. You're important to me. And if you've been here before, whether it's one time, whether it's 250 times, I just want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for showing up and investing in yourself, because that's what this is all about. But it's also about having some fun. So let's have some fun today. I want to encourage you to pay the fee. The fee is just to pay it forward and share this episode with one person. All you have to do is grab the link, send it in a text message, an email, a DM on social media, or just mention the podcast, mention this episode to someone else. That's the fee. That's the only fee that we ask for you to listen today. Otherwise, it's 100% for free. And by the way, we cannot grow without your referrals, your introductions. And so we're just so thankful for those. We're so thankful for you. And I just appreciate you. Also want to ask you, please, to give us a rating and review and subscribe or follow Elevate Podcast on wherever it is that you listen or watch podcasts, because we're going to continue to bring massive value to you. And the way that we do that is by receiving your feedback. What do you love about this podcast? And we've got to show others that, you know what, there's some social proof out there. And you do that by taking 10 to 15 seconds of your own time. And we just appreciate that. So with all that said, I'm done with my asks for the day. Now I'm going to give to you. So here we go. I want to introduce you to Alex Jarbo, who is a short-term rental developer and manager. He was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. He served in the Marine Corps for 4.5 years, where he was stationed in Washington, D.C., apart from the Marine Corps Honor Guard. He left the Marine Corps at 22 years old to pursue his career as a real estate professional. He's the founder of and CEO of Sargon Investments, and he has a goal of developing 650 cabins in the next 3 years. Alex holds an MBA with a concentration in real estate development and is currently finishing a doctorate in business with a concentration in leadership. He's the host of the YouTube channel Alex Builds, where he teaches the ins and outs of short-term development and management. And I can tell you right now, we're going to learn the ins and outs of short-term development and management today in a super awesome conversation, a very in-depth conversation, tactical, strategic discussion that brings us from not only mindset, mind expansion, personal development, from, thinking, but also to execution. And marrying those things together, I think, is super valuable. So please enjoy this awesome conversation with Alex Jarbo. Alex Jarbo, welcome to Elevate, my friend. How are you?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm amazing. And I'm excited to be here with you. I'm excited to get to know you better, to share that with Elevate Nation. Before we dive into this conversation, my friend, tell me a little bit about yourself. And the way that I'd like you to do this is play a little bit of ball with me. If you were to describe yourself in the way that the people that know you best would describe you, how would they do that?
I'm very focused, almost like to my detriment. Sometimes it's like, if there's a specific thing that needs to get done, if there's a topic I'm very interested in, it's pretty normal for me to spend 10, 12 hours on it pretty just zoned in on the process. So sometimes that gets in the way of things. But that, I mean, it's also helped me out a lot. Just developing the habit of just staying focused. So
Where
yeah.
did that come from?
Honestly, man, and we might talk about it a little later, but it honestly started by reading Jay Papasan's The One Thing, and just understanding how to block your time, and understand how to just put a just simple stuff like putting your schedule together. Like in that book, it talks about like three hours is a good time block, but you can go way beyond that. And if you're working on stuff you enjoy, it's pretty easy for time just to fly by. So.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
big shout out to Jay Papasan, former Elevate guest himself, and an amazing guy. It's interesting. I've stayed connected with him, since we had that conversation, and he is who he is, not only in public and what he does for his writing. Obviously, The One Thing being a very impactful book for so many different people. But it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, was it almost just the awareness that, hey, honing in and getting focused on one thing is a separator? It's a way for you to create excellence. It's a way for you to make impact, not only in terms of your goals, but for other people. Or give me a sense of why that was so impactful for you.
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said about it being a separator. It's a whole bunch of little things that are done consistently that lead to these big results. And that's something that I realized. Also, I realized if I try to attack my big thing, my one thing or my big thing or 1 to 3 things in the beginning of the day, it feels like everything else becomes easier throughout the whole day, where you're not worrying about it, or it's something, it's like sitting in the back of your mind. And it's usually the stuff that makes you the most uncomfortable is what you're pushing off to the side. And that's probably what I realized, is that's sort of what the one thing you have to focus on. Yeah. And ever since I started doing that, to answer your question, it felt like a lot of the rest of the stress throughout the whole day was like significantly reduced by just working on the thing that I felt like was the most important for that day. And it
Yeah.
changes every day too. Sometimes it's not the same thing. So
I really like that thinking too, especially in this world that we live in. We have so many different things that are calling for our attention, or perhaps designed to take our attention away.
absolutely.
And it can be challenging to keep your focus, keep your attention. But when you bring it down to it, it's like, well, at any moment in time, there's one thing that I'm doing. Like right now, it's like I'm having this conversation with you. I could be thinking about these deals that I have going on. I could be thinking about the emails that are unread right now. I could be thinking about the projects that are in various stages of completion, or I could be thinking about my family. I could be thinking about my fitness, my nutrition, all these different things. But I need to focus and be here with you. And that is a difference maker. I think of that, like almost putting the, what is he? It's like the thing on the door, do not disturb. I'm working on my one thing. And
Right.
that is a difference maker.
For sure. And it's also like kicking like, especially with like Apple products or any type of things, it's like your messaging, your FaceTime's all connected to the same thing. And
Right.
it's like get your phone, disconnect all that stuff during your time block, get your phone out of your room because you're gonna look at it. There's a really cool app I use called it's called Forest. Yeah, Forest, where it's like I had found out about it through a podcast I was listening to, and it's you set a time limit on it, so it's like say 3 hours, and if it grows like a little tree, and it's like the smallest little thing, but it's like it grows a little tree. If you touch your phone, the tree dies. So like if you open your phone, and it's like you have like this focus forest is what they call it. But that little thing, man, even if I like decide to like go up, pick up and like look at my phone for some reason, it's like I don't want that tree to die. Like I'm gonna
That's
put my phone
interesting.
down. Yeah. So
I love it. Yeah, the do not disturb button on my phone is the most important button. And
yeah.
while we have
And
all these great things, I mean, I remember talking to Nir Eyal, and he wrote a book called Indistractable. A very important read and a very important distinction in this world to recognize and utilize technology and all these tools and the abundance of communication, the abundance of information that we have, and not let it use you,
right.
but see it in the way of gratitude, and not just, hey, turning that off and not utilizing that. Because I can't imagine living in this world like without being able to do what we're doing right now. Like we're talking to thousands of people at one time together. That is an amazing ability, but at the same time, we have to focus, and we've got to utilize tools like that to hone in our focus. So I just think it's an important distinction, and I love that. I love to hear that that was really a turning point for you, and to recognize that and implement that into your life. But man, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your backstory. I think it's exciting in terms of where you took it based on what I know. But give me a sense of what life was like growing up, and connect the dots a little bit for us.
Yeah, so I'm originally born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And then my family had moved, I think I was like 10 years old, about 10, 20 miles north of Detroit, in a suburb of Detroit. When I was about 17, I decided to join the Marine Corps. Was in the Marine Corps for about like 4.5 years. I felt like I got to a point in the Marine Corps where I couldn't sort of like grow as a person as where I needed to be, or I felt like I needed to be. And also I wanted to get married. I was an infantryman by trade, and I saw a lot of my friends sort of go through marriage troubles. It's just a very, very high stress job. And I sort of I didn't want to be one of those guys or go through that. So during my last year of the military, I decided to learn about real estate during any free time I had. And I came across short-term rental investing through someone on YouTube. This was about like 7 years ago at this point. And I reached out to him, and I found out that like a lot of his properties were like in the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area, which like I feel like everyone gravitates towards now when it comes to short-term rentals. But he had recommended a couple other markets after we did a couple calls together. And we sort of landed. I landed with my fiance's help, sort of landed on Asheville, which is where I'm at now. And so like the day I got out of the Marine Corps, like packed up everything and moved directly to Asheville the same day that I got out. And I had about like 8 months of money saved up, like for expenses and stuff, to sort of just work on stuff that I wanted to work on. And I decided to get my real estate license right in North Carolina, right when I moved here. And sort of just started helping clients purchasing and selling houses. I didn't really enjoy being an agent too much. So I aggressively started to like look for property that I could purchase like with my VA loan, where I was looking for like a duplex or something similar with like even like a detached like mother-in-law suite, where I could live in one unit and rent out the other unit. And the VA loan or FHA loan allows you to do that. What I realized really quickly was that like a lot of the this was even 5 years ago, like a lot of the listed properties that would do well on Airbnb were either priced way out of my price range, or there was just like a crazy bidding war on them. And I decided to build like my first property, my first investment property was a new construction build. It wasn't spec, it was like custom built, permanent foundation, stick built, ground up, everything. And yeah, it was just that was my first property. I couldn't use a VA loan for it at the time. So I found a lender. They don't do it anymore, but they offered like a 10% down loan. And I didn't have like the down payment for it, which was about like 15 grand. And so I decided to list my apartment on Airbnb, and I slept in my car like in a Walmart parking lot
Wow.
for about like 3 months, and until I had saved the money up for the down payment. And so I was going to be married in like less than a year. My wife was going to move down here to Asheville, and I didn't really have anything to show for it at the time. So like I was really determined to get into short-term rentals. So we built our first one about 3 years ago, and it's been bringing in an incredible cash flow. After I saw how good the cash flow was doing on that first property, we got some investor money together, and we just broke ground on 10 separate cabins, which is 3 separate projects right now. But another thing I realized was like the best use of my time, and this is what I'm working on now, the best use of my time would be to sort of develop larger projects. I realized like working on 6 projects, getting the permit together, working with the engineers, working with the GC was about the same. Like I could use that time to sort of work on some of these larger projects that we're doing on. So I went out. I wasn't really comfortable in my abilities to do say like a 30 to 50 unit development at once without some guidance. There isn't really too much stuff out there on top of like subdivision development and outside of like real estate textbooks and stuff. So I got a one-on-one mentor and he specifically dealt in development his whole life, his professional life. And then he helped me realize like how small my goals were. Like I came to him, I was like, hey, I want to be like in the next 3 to 5 years, I want to be at 30 cabins. And he's like, why can't we get to 30 cabins in the next like 6 months, or at least like have 30 cabins like in the pipeline in the next 30 months of 6 months. And so like right now we're developing, we're working on a 40 to 50 unit resort, like a boutique resort, in addition to the other projects that we're planning. We're also planning on getting into like 3 new markets. And after raising money for those first couple of deals I just talked about, I realized like a lot of investors are eager to get into the short-term rental space, but are sort of going through like the same issues that I went through. And right now, just the competition is so high that like these properties I'm seeing are just, and I've tried purchasing some of them still, but they're just getting bidded up to a point where they're barely profitable. So like, but by taking on investors, we're now like able to develop. What we do is we take on the investors, we develop the projects, and then we don't flip them. It's a long-term hold. We manage the properties, and that's sort of part of our value proposition to our investors is we obviously offer a way lower management fee than if they were to go and find a manager that's going to charge them anywhere between 20 to 30%. But yeah, it's like we're able to offer them above than average returns right now. Yeah, it's been really fun. So seeing like everything transform in the last 6 months or so. Like I said, just the appetite's there for short-term rentals. It's just in the last 3 years, it's just gotten very difficult to find these like good cash flowing properties. So.
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir to myself and many of the listeners who are saying, it's thinking about the economic circumstances of course, the past 18, 24 months. I mean, you think about the level of liquidity, the level of dollars that are chasing yield, especially in relation to the historic inflation that we're seeing. I mean, you can't just sit on cash. At the same time, there's a lot of bad deals that are being done. So it requires a lot of diligence and persistence to find those deals. And I do want to talk about that. I want to talk about the thinking behind short-term rentals and obviously your strategy. I mean, you just mentioned a lot of it there, but I want to dive into a lot of the different aspects and give the listener an opportunity to dive into that and consider that maybe for expansion themselves or just for multidisciplinary learning. I think there's a lot to be said about studying different realms or different investment techniques and applying that to yourself. Before we do that, actually, I'm just curious. I mean, you mentioned leaving Marine Corps and the thought process, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the thought process was, hey, if I can expand into real estate or if I can evolve into being a real estate investor, I can protect the future of my marriage. Am I understanding that correctly?
And I say that with a grain of salt just because I don't want like other service members to get assault and like take that the wrong way. But I wanted to spend more time with my future, with my family, and even like my parents and stuff, where I wanted a little bit more flexibility with my time, where like if a family emergency happened, like all my family's in Michigan. So if a family emergency happened, or even if we just want to take a trip, if we want to go take a trip and see my parents this weekend, we can go do that. Or if we want to take a vacation, go to the West Coast when it's cold here, like we can go do that. So that's mainly why I wanted to do it. It was just to have the flexibility of where I can just pick up and go wherever we wanted to. So
yeah, lifestyle design, man. I get that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would imagine that probably a very high percentage of real estate investors are in that boat to a certain degree. It's about designing a life. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I saw too, man, was when I started talking about this stuff about like, I mean, there are a lot of veterans and guys who are about to be veterans who are coming out of the military that do get into real estate. Like a lot of guys that I talk to at different real estate conferences, like they have a military background, and I don't know why the military sort of fosters that type of thinking. It's like, I want to go out and do my own thing. But there's definitely veterans are definitely like, I meet a lot of veterans that are eager to get into real estate. So it's cool to talk about this type of stuff. Sometimes
I do too. And well, so, first of all, thank you for your service to our country. And
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that thinking to this world as well, and sharing that, because there's certainly a clue there, right? We may not know what that clue is why so many service members have moved into real estate investing, but maybe there's a clue in terms of that training or that thought process that we can apply. Those who may have not served can apply to optimize or maximize our own opportunities and design our own lifestyle as a result, and also partner together, which is a beautiful thing.
Beautiful thing.
I think
Yep.
that partnerships are one of the most exciting things that I've discovered in real estate as well. Is there anything that you would add to that?
No, definitely. And there's two parts to it. It's the investors have the capital and they're looking to deploy it, and then you're bringing them a unique deal a lot of the times. That it's definitely a symbiotic relationship between the two. But also saying like the first investor I took on was my friend, a close friend of mine, and we're doing a couple cabins together. But just based off the projections, it's really cool to be able to see what he's going to be able to do with that cash flow. And like he just came out of the military too, and it's like he's almost going to be pretty close to financially free just off the first couple cabins. And then we do plan on doing more together. So it's really cool seeing that too. It's like seeing that people are able to make a shift in their lives just based off of the stuff that you're providing your investors. And I'm sure
That
you
is,
see that the same way too.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's super cool, man. So talk to me about the thinking and the thesis behind short-term rentals. Like why did that asset class hold your attention as you made your transition, and why does it continue to hold your attention?
Yeah. So just you had mentioned earlier about like it's really important as a real estate investor, and just an investor in general. But once you like when people say, "Hey, what do you do?" and you're like, you can't just say I'm in real estate. It's such a broad term. Like there are
So
so
true.
many niches and sub niches. But it is important to learn the different parts of real estate, whether it be single family houses, rehabbing, flipping, multifamily, RV investing, mobile home parks, and land investing, short-term rentals, and everything in between. It's important to look at those different things to see like so like every real estate book I read, whether it be in short-term rentals or say multifamily, I look at it through the lens of short-term rentals is what I'm
Hmm.
in now. So I originally I was a little too young to sort of understand what happened during 2008 and 9. So that's where I started. I started really focusing on what were the factors that contributed to like the 2008 recession, 2009 recession. And I told myself like I want to be able to be in control of my own asset. So it's like stock market, not necessarily too passive, but I didn't want to be like a day trader where it's like sitting down in front of a computer and just looking at stocks all day. And then at the same time, I wanted to find something that I could dedicate like my full time to. So if you're looking to just put your money into like the S&P 500, that's pretty passive. So once I decided on real estate, I wanted to sort of find like recession resistant classes within real estate. Multifamily was interesting at the time, but the it's not necessarily the barrier to entry. It's just the cap rates are a little compressed right now. And the short-term rentals I felt like was the easiest barrier to entry in terms of where I was at in my life at that time. And I love the uniqueness of it, where we can like our first property was an A-frame, so we design it from the ground up, and it it's done so well that that sort of speaks to the strategy. It's designing these unique properties that people want to stay in, where we focus on properties that are experiences within themselves. It's not just, hey, you're visiting a cool city and this is just a place to lay your head at night. It's a we call it like Instagrammable properties. It's people who are sharing these properties with their friends and on their social media. So that's sort of the thesis behind that. Yeah, and the new development just gives us like obviously like it takes about like 8 months to a year right now to develop these properties, but it gives us more flexibility to be able to design them as short-term rentals. The uniqueness of it, we do underwrite them as long-term rentals, and we can talk about that. Just sort of the strategy behind like how we underwrite the properties. But
Is that more
yeah,
of like a fallback plan,
yeah,
contingency plan? Okay.
yeah, absolutely. If like the city or the county decides to, hey, like no more short-term rentals, and you're
Hmm.
like, oh crap, what do I do with this? So the multiple, I mean, it's just very, with any real estate project, like it's very important to think of the exit in mind in the beginning, even if it is a long-term hold play, just really important to think about the exit in mind.
Yeah, there's a great book that I read just a couple months ago called Antifragile by Nassim Taleb. And one of the
Interesting.
things that he says is the most anti-fragile thing in the world, which by the way, what he means by that is things that make things stronger, like or chaos or disorder or uncertainty that makes certain things stronger. And what he says is one of the most anti-fragile thing is options. So like you can think of an option contract. Like if you're a developer, a lot of times you utilize an option contract, which basically says I have the option to exercise my purchase right on this property. And I think about that being a very anti-fragile opportunity because in the future, if the economy skyrockets and things are booming and that location is in the path of progress in a tremendous way, exercise your option, develop that property. If it goes in the opposite direction, don't exercise your option. Yeah, you paid for it and so forth, but you have optionality. But I think about what you just described there in the same capacity as well to say, all right, well, short-term rentals works really well in this market. And we would, probably anticipate that will continue. And obviously all real estate is hyper local, but that gives you the opportunity of saying, okay, worst case scenario, we can still operate in this capacity.
Right, like worst, like just like you just said, like just having
Like
different
catastrophic.
options. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we also, it's very important to apply that to different phases of the project too. So say it's
Mm-hmm.
like you put all of this money into due diligence and you, for some reason, you get to a point where you can't break ground, but it's like, okay, but you do have all of this work. Say if like the GC is just too busy or you can't find a GC and you personally can't find a lender, but many different things that can go wrong. It's like at least you have, say, like a project that's already planned that it can almost be like a land entitlement play where you can sell that to another developer. So it's important to have different exits even throughout the building process because development is riskier than say
Mm-hmm.
going into and just purchasing a multifamily asset that doesn't need too much work. So that,
That's a
yeah.
really good distinction. Yeah, I think it's important throughout the entire phase of your project, whether you're a developer, investor, whether you're doing value add deals. It's like, all right, well, what are your plan A, B, C, D, E? And you don't have to exhaust yourself by fully drafting it out, but being willing to adapt and move in different directions. At least having a general thought process of what will you do when this happens and not be caught off guard. I don't know about you, Alex, but like when I got started, I was caught off guard, man. I was on my heels in different challenging
Yeah.
circumstances. You get into that as you kind of get more experience, but over time, you don't really want to be in that position. So you're always going to be on your toes. But talk to me a little bit about your strategy. I mean, obviously, you're talking about developing, cabins as you have described them. But what type of sites do you look for? You mentioned some of the markets briefly, but just give us a sense of what your overall strategy looks like.
Yeah, so right now we're mainly in Western North Carolina, but we feel like I'm open to looking at other markets. We look at just because I decided to move here, but mountain markets are a little bit cheaper to develop than say if you were trying to be on the beach. They're also less seasonal. So mountain markets, uh, you can't really go wrong with developing like anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes of an entrance to a national forest or a national park. So the big boy is like the Smoky Mountains. I mean, they just every park saw like a record in the last year of like visitations and stuff. So like
Yeah, especially during the pandemic, right?
right. So like we're in the Blue Ridge Mountains, but like Smoky Mountains are about 45 minutes away from us. So I mean, they saw like 20 million visitors last year. So it's like they're
Wow.
even with how popular Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville is right now, there's still an appetite for cabins to be developed there. Um, so yeah, we
Especially with the big fire. There was a big fire in
right,
Gatlinburg, right? So there's a
right.
lot of new development potential there, right?
Right, right. And so yeah, so we're focusing on the mountains, and then like I already talked about the uniqueness of the cabins. Well, I like to keep them pretty separate. Like we're not developing condos, we're not developing like multi-unit developments. It's well, like in terms of like attached multi-unit. But like as we're developing the 40 to 50 unit project right now where they're all detached, but they're also close, and we're sort of like in the niche that we're in. We're sort of in the boutique resort development is what I look at it as, where there isn't an on-site manager. It's the property is an experience in itself. There's hiking trails throughout, but at the same time, They can also visit the different other hiking trails, the different attractions that the city sort of provides. And sort of talk about, go back to what you had said about why did I choose this class and what our strategy is the short-term rental stuff, even during a bad economy or sort of during a downturn, the rates tend to stay the same. If you look at historical averages, luxury properties sort of take a little bit of a hit, say like in 2008 and 9. COVID isn't really the best gauge of to look at how good short-term rentals did because everyone was trapped, like not trapped, but like they couldn't travel internationally. So obviously prices for cabins and stuff sort of went up and people were comfortable paying that, especially with people working from home and people were traveling more domestically. And so the strategy even before COVID, man, was we felt like people were comfortable. We invest in drive-in cities where people aren't really, they're used to driving 25, 30, 40 minutes for an attraction, compared to like getting an Uber or something. And I think part of that comes from just we have a very small airport, like we have 4 gates. So same thing with the Smoky Mountains, like people are used to driving. So we figured that people would be pretty comfortable driving 15 to 30 minutes away from the city to be able to have their own cabin where they can have their family in there, compared to like a hotel room. And sort of COVID sort of like solidified that too, was people sort of went out from the metro cities, and sort of stayed in cabins or stayed in houses and then drove into or traveled to the city. So yeah, the rates are pretty recession resistant. And I think it's because during a downturn, people are more, they're not going to go spend, like they have less spending money. So they're not going to go out and internationally and go spend money there, but they'll take weekend trips. They'll take trips to maybe an hour or two away from them where they can get away compared to spending 5 to 10,000 internationally. So that's sort of our strategy going forward, is, and like our thesis is that we're pretty comfortable with both the design of the cabins, but also that strategy of like people, it's pretty recession resistant. So
talk to me about finding deals or finding parcels to develop. I mean, are you driving, target markets? Or are you driving them on Google Maps physically? You have agents that are sourcing opportunities for you, doing mailers. Give us a sense of how you're finding deals and, opportunities to evaluate.
Yeah, and it sort of goes in and out. Like I'll go like 2 weeks with looking at property, and then once we finally get a property under contract, it sort of goes into like the due diligence where we stop looking for property. But yeah, mainly I'm licensed here, but I also work with an agent that she's a phenomenal negotiator. So I'm more than happy to pay her commission, just to have her on my team. So she'll bring me deals. I mean, I have access to her, the MLS too. So we're constantly looking at deals. Zoning is big for the bigger projects that we're doing right now, and that's going to be different in every market. But making sure that the county allows for the amount of units that we want to put on the acreage. And I've said this time and time again, the most important thing to think about is access to the property. So the property might look cool when you're looking at it on your satellite images, when you're looking at it on Google Maps, but it either, if you don't live in the market, you want an agent or someone to drive out there to go look at the property. But like we're mainly investing in anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes of where I live. So the next step is to drive out there, because the big, like I said, the biggest thing to think about is the drive that you're taking up to the property is the drive that your guest is going to be taking up to the property. And we've been in Airbnbs before, and I've heard it from friends, like they'll drive 20, 30 minutes down like a gravel road just to get to the property. And one, that's not safe, but two, you don't want your guests annoyed like the second they stepped into your property. So like a lot of times our guests are, since we're developing in more rural areas, our guests are arriving a lot of times at night, and they're in a new area, and you don't want them to be driving down like a weird squiggly road for 20 to 30 minutes, even if it's like a mile. So that's the biggest thing, is we look for properties that are off of a double lane state maintained road. And then we can put in our own infrastructure. So that's step one. Step two is just sending the property over to our engineers and figuring out how many units we can actually put on the property, because that's super important. And that's sort of we have a general idea of, just like you said earlier, about like when you first start in development, you don't know what you don't know. So, and I feel like that holds true in multifamily and other real estate. And but now it's like we have a general idea of what we want to pay for the property. Once we get it under contract, send it to our engineers, and they're like, hey, you wanted to put 40 on here, you can only put 20. And you're like, okay, we can only put 20, that we go back to renegotiate on the property.
And then you're putting together your pro forma, your projections to say, all right, well, if we can do 20, here's what that might look like. Here's what the revenue might look like, and so forth. And then you back into your value in that capacity, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we look at properties that already have some sort of cash, like they were already short-term rentals, but it's like the money's in the land. So like the property might be worth like $200,000-$300,000, but it's listed for 1.1 million because it has like 50 acres attached to it. So it's like a lot of times we'll see if that property is even, maybe it has a 65% occupancy rate, and we're usually closer to like 90%. So we're like, okay, maybe once we bring this to our investors, we can show them, hey, like this is practically a value add. This is what we do with this property, and it'll be throwing off some cash flow during the development phase. So that's another strategy.
Hey guys, just a quick word from our sponsor, then we'll be right back to the show. This episode of Elevate is brought to you by CF Capital, a national real estate investment firm founded by myself and my business partner, Brian Flaherty. CF Capital's mission is to provide property investment and asset management solutions to help investors like you maximize their returns by investing in high-value multifamily communities. If you are looking for risk-adjusted alternative investments in quality apartment communities, are seeking tax-optimized cash flow with appreciation upside, without all the hassles of management, you might benefit from learning more about investing alongside our team. You're invited to reach out and learn more about how you can invest with us by visiting cfcapllc.com. We're also currently offering a free ebook called The Bottom Line, 10 Ways to Increase Cash Flow in an Apartment Complex. Whether you're a new or experienced investor, we're confident you'll find massive value in this resource. So go get your free copy today at cfcapllc.com. And now, please enjoy the rest of the show. Hey guys, my friend Damian Lupo just informed me that checkbook IRAs have been made illegal by the U.S. tax court. That means if you have a checkbook IRA, your holdings are now disqualified. That means taxes and penalties of up to 50% or more. Don't panic. Damian and the EQRP company can fix this. Lucky for you, those IRAs can be converted into EQRPs. Plus, you can do this retroactive to the last year, getting tax deductions and reducing your taxable income from last year. Want to invest your 401k or IRA in real estate, Bitcoin, gold, or even your own business? You can. Whether you're a full-time investor, retired, a dentist with dozens of employees, if you're listening, you qualify. The EQRP works and is your secret weapon. And now it's retroactive. They have your solution. By the way, if you got bad advice and use an IRA for an apartment syndication, you are sitting on a UBIT time bomb. But don't worry, there's a solution, the EQRP. The EQRP company is ready to help you get control of your money, kill UBIT, and help you pay way less taxes. Want to learn more about this strategy? Simply text the word ELEVATE to 307-213-3475 for Damian's brand new 2022 EQRP special report. Paying tax or letting Wall Street suck you dry is dumb. Your first step is freeing your retirement money by sending a text to 307-213-3475 with the word ELEVATE. Give me a look behind the curtain on return metrics. I do want to go back and talk about some of the development process and so forth, and some of the ways that you're assembling the team, assembling the resources necessary. But as we're on this topic, let's talk about return metrics. I mean, when you look at a deal, whether it's 5 acres, 10 acres, 50 acres, and you're running a pro forma, what makes a deal worth pursuing for you from a return standpoint?
Yeah, it's different. It's different with each investor and what they're comfortable with the risk, especially with like how materials costs and labor costs are right now. But I mean, to give an example, again, this property was built before COVID and everything, but I think our cap rate, this was a property that I own 100%. But just on our first property, and when I say this, I've said this in other interviews, and people sort of come back and go, no, like he's being screwed or those numbers aren't right. But like our cap rate on our first property was like 26%.
Are you talking about at stabilization after your development, after you've
about a year and a half of renting? Yeah. So we built it for about 202,000. And again, this is a small project compared to what we're working with now, but we we built it for 202, and then just last year did like 80,000 in gross and about 50,000 in net. And it's like that's say like right now that same property will probably cost anywhere between 230 to 250 to build fully furnished. Um, but these properties, like these properties that we're developing, throw out anywhere between 30 to 50,000 in cash flow per property.
So let's stay on that example. I think that's a great example. When you think about that deal, is your strategy, all right, let's develop the deal, let's stabilize the deal, let's cash flow the deal. Are you holding thereafter? And also I want to know how you're financing. You mentioned you're an investor. Are you going with, are you syndicating these deals, or what does that look like as well?
That first project was just a project that I just took on with a normal conventional loan. For people who are actually looking to get into some of these projects, both development and not development, I mean, the easiest way to get into it, if you're not in your own market, so you live like, I forgot what the exact number is, but it's like 60 to 80 miles away from your market, the market that you want to invest in, you can simply get a second home loan anywhere between 80 to 90% LTV. And, but yeah, it's the way the bigger projects, like we just got approved to do 6 cabins right next to each other with the county. We just approach a local bank with that. Usually if you're in a market that has vacation rentals, more and more banks are starting to lend on these projects because they saw what happened with COVID, and you can sort of look at historical averages and see that, hey, like, I mean, they used to be looked at as a more of like riskier real estate class, but I mean, the numbers are there. Airbnb and VRBO continue to become more popular than hotels. Like, and I just read an article the other day where in this county, like hotels saw a revenue drop of 20%, and then short-term rentals in the same exact market in that same exact time frame saw like a revenue increase of like 25%. So that's sort of the trend that I see, at least in my market.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So are you holding these deals long term? Or are you doing any refinances after stabilization or anything like that? Or what does that look like?
Yeah. So for the projects that we take on the investors with, it's a 10-year hold, but depending on what the market looks like, we do like to refinance and give our investor capital back. Yeah, that's just like what the market looks like and stuff.
So for folks that are investing with you, are they investing passively?
Yeah, very, very passively. So right now we're working on our Class A, Class B shares because I was originally only doing joint venture deals, but for this bigger project, we do want to do a syndication. Just makes it a little bit more cleaner for both the investors and us. But yeah, it's Class A share, Class B share. We haven't figured out exactly how much we're going to be offering in both of those, just because we're waiting for our engineers to get back to us to tell us exactly how many units we can put on the property that we're getting under contract.
I love it, man. Talk to me about your development process. I mean, when you're looking at a deal, give us a walk from A to Z of, taking the deal, obviously negotiating the deal and putting it under contract, but from there to bringing the deal out of the ground. What does that look like from your team's perspective?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, say you're doing a big deal like this. I mean, we already have some relationships with some of the people that we work with, but I would say the 3 biggest ones is going to be your general contractor, your cleaning company, and then your bank. So what I realized recently too, man, is like if you're working within your market, or if you're going to a market that you're looking to invest, just go and walk into the bank. Don't, like, a lot of times, like we're like, people are getting this, going back to the beginning of the interview, like people are getting bombarded with emails and text messages and phone calls, and everyone's inbox is full and blah, blah, blah. Just walk in the bank. Just walk in the bank and be like, I want to speak to do your research on the bank, make sure they actually offer the commercial loans that commercial construction loans or commercial loans that you're looking to get. But walk in the bank, ask to talk to someone, and more than likely they're probably going to take you that second. Is what I saw. Is I got to a point where I was getting frustrated with calling these banks, not getting answers, and they're just busy. They're nothing against them. It's just people are busy. So we walked in with local banks, talked to a couple of them, and we decided on one. So that's going to be the first step.
By the way, can I make a comment here on this?
Yeah.
Banks make money by lending money.
The product is money.
They want to approve you. They want to give you money, period. Right. So, remove the unwillingness to have this discussion or to be worried about it. You're actually doing them a favor. So
money is their product. Yeah. Money is their product. It's that simple. Yeah. So So that's the first step. Second step before you decide to go into a market is make sure that the infrastructure, not the infrastructure, the type of people that you're going to be hiring. I don't run the cleaning side of the company. That I push that out to a company that specializes in that, and I recommend people do that unless if you get to a certain point where you do want to take some revenue based off the cleaning fee. But um, making sure that the there are cleaners or at least cleaning companies in that area. Again, depending on how big you want to go. If you're only looking to do like one or two projects, it's fine to get maybe someone that like one or two people to take care of the project.
I think it's really
But
interesting that this is a part of the early part of the development process for short-term rentals. I think that's very unique because you're already thinking about, all right, this is a huge part of the management. If we don't have this, this may not be a deal for us.
yeah, and this is coming from someone who is part of the value to our investors is managing the property itself, and that's how we can
Sure.
get some of these higher returns. But it's the same thing. Like if you just replace the cleaning company with the manager, like you got to make sure that there's good short-term rental managers, because there's a difference between short-term rental management and long-term, like a person who's signing a six month to a year lease. So if you just replace that with the cleaning company with a management company, if you don't want to manage the properties, you want to make sure that there are good managers. I would say 2 to 3 that you can interview. That's the same thing if like Ken McElroy's book on multifamily investing talks about making sure that there are good multifamily managers in the area before, like in an area that you're looking to invest in, going out there and interviewing them. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
But going back to the cleaning company, making sure if you want to do some, you're going to see how good the cash flows are, and you're going to be, okay, I want to do some of these bigger ones. If you're managing them yourself, you just want to make sure that you are selecting a cleaning crew that you can grow with. That's very important. And then the last step is GCs are sort of slammed right now. And it's like there's a wait list with general contractors and builders and stuff. So if you're looking to do these smaller projects, making sure that you're probably not going to find your GC on Google, because if they took the time to put together a nice looking website and they have forms where you can sort of find them and blah blah blah. Now, if you're doing a bigger project that might be a luxury project, you can probably convince them to work on you, but they might not take on like your 900 square foot cabin or your 1,300 square foot cabin, or they might be booked out. So what one of my investors who actually did this for one of their projects where they live is they looked at all of who they went to the county's website, the city's website, and they saw who's pulling all of the building permits. And they sort of just went down the list, because the builder has to put their phone number and their contact info there. Is they sort of just went down the list and started contacting some of these smaller builders. So if you're going into a new market, that's what I recommend doing. We have a really good relationship with the builder that we have now. And I'm always on the lookout. Like you should be always on the lookout for either upgrading your team. Say if my GC gets to a point where he's busy enough with my projects, but I still want to work on other projects, just having a backup GC to sort of to be able to take some of that overflow, depending on how flexible you are.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And then, obviously beyond, the evaluation of the team and, the evaluation of the viability of the project from a management perspective moving forward, it's obviously, does the zoning work for the site? What about my design? Let's pull together the design. It's also obtaining permits, the necessary permits. It's understanding utilities, easements, anything that's involved there, gaining that approval, and then putting a shovel in the ground, right?
Right. Yeah. So you just mentioned utilities. That's big right now, is obviously electricity. And we've dealt with that before, is properties that are landlocked. And when you're in the more rural areas, some of the neighbors might not want to give you, say, like an electricity easement, a driveway easement. An easement is just a right of way, like to be able to go through their land to be able to access the land that you're looking to purchase or develop. And right now, some companies are not going back to remote. I mean, some companies are not going back to in person. They're going to be remote permanently. So a lot of people are traveling more, which is great. Taking these small weekend trips. And I would say maybe 30 to 50% of my people who are staying there during the weekday, my guests are working from home. So making sure that you have access to be able to, like, the property has access to reliable internet. So there's sort of a gray area there where you don't want to go too far away from the city where the land is cheaper, but you won't be able to get access to like really high speed internet, or wired internet. So yeah,
Until Elon Musk gives us, global
Starlink.
internet with the, what is it, Starlink? Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
Starlink. I'm on their wait list. Yeah.
I love it, man. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be coming soon, in all seriousness. But no, that's awesome. You were talking about nuances for short-term rental management, and I'd love to dive into that. Just give me a sense of what you look for in a management company that's going to. Obviously, you guys do in-house management yourself. Maybe
Yeah.
you could even talk about that. But what sets you apart from others, and what's going to set investors up for success in this capacity?
Yeah, technology is going to be the biggest thing, man, is the because short-term rentals have been around forever. So I think that's very important to realize is before Airbnb, which was 2008, and then before VRBO, which whenever that was, short-term rentals have always been a thing. It's just people picking up a phone and blah blah blah. Some management companies still work like that where they don't, and it's a double-edged sword where it's like you don't want to pay the fee to be able to be on these websites, and we want people to go through your own website, but at the same time that's a double-edged sword because there are so many people on Airbnb, VRBO, booking.com now. So we look at, if we're not managing the property, say if I'm purchasing a property in California, which I just don't want to put a team together to be able to manage it myself, I would push it to another manager. Um, we look at their technology is what how do they handle their messaging? Well, 80% of our messaging is automated. The check-in messages, the checkout messages, the review request messages, the pre-approval messages. 80% of that is automated. And then also just what their track record is. I mean, it's if the property is only getting like a 50% occupancy, like you probably don't want to hire that, or they're at, just look at their comparables. Like it's that simple. It's just it's what we keep talking about. The principles are the same. They're just called a little bit differently. Like when it comes to hiring a manager or just anything in real estate, it's and communication's another thing. Like if they're terrible at communicating with you, they're probably not going to be good communicating with the guest.
It's true.
Making sure that they have some sort of emergency, both maintenance and emergency, like, hey, what happens if my guest gets lost because Google Maps decided to throw them in a different direction? Is there emergency services in terms of, if my guest calls or if someone who's booking my property calls, is someone going to pick up the phone or gonna respond to them really soon? Because yeah, that is different. Is you're not dealing with a long-term renter that once they look at the property or once they start renting the property, it's their house. They can drive there whenever they want. They know how to get there. This is a person more than likely has never been to your property. They don't know where it's at. And if they get lost, you got to make sure that that manager has something in place to be able to handle that. So that's the small things. And just what type of amenities would they recommend offering to the guests? Do they offer free snacks, free popcorn? We like to lay out like a free bottle of wine to our guests, and that makes a world of a difference. And that's sort of get into the management side, but yeah, just what type of amenities they offer, and then just their track record is just going to be huge.
That's super helpful. And I like the automation thought process around the communication, but also just the heightened importance of communication in this capacity, because, it's a total change from, hey, I have a long-term resident or a long-term tenant to I have a short-term, and they have high level of needs for that period of time, and then they're gone. And then we have a new high level of needs, but I'm sure you're identifying those patterns. Obviously, as you mentioned, 80% are ongoing. I'm actually curious, thinking about management, obviously looking at track record, one of the pieces of track record you mentioned there was occupancy. What's the rule of thumb in terms of how you're evaluating deals for short-term rentals? Like, what type of occupancy do you expect? And then what are you seeing across the market right now?
Right. So I mean, it's pretty normal to talk to short-term rental investors and people in the short-term rental market and be like, yo, I was pretty close to 100% occupancy during COVID. There are different ways. So like when you're looking at, say, like a single family house, long-term rental, you have like the 1% rule, the 50% rule. So I'd say like the 1% rule, the 50% rule for short-term rentals, this is before you do your actual in-depth analysis, is you want to look at what the property would book for on the weekends. And you can do that either by looking at Airbnb, sort of maybe going like 3 or 4 months out into the future and sort of looking at properties that are similar to yours. There's a really good platform called airdna.co, which I've mentioned a couple times, that sort of it pulls every property from VRBO and Airbnb, and it shows what their top line number is. And then what their average daily rate is, what their occupancy rate for is. So you can sort of look at properties that are similar to yours. Distance away from properties is not really a big deal. It's more like distance to the city. So if you have like 2 properties that are completely on the other side of each other, that's not as a big of a deal as if it was like 2 single-family houses for long-term rentals that were on the other side. I hope that makes sense. But so we look at the 1%, 50% rule for on the short-term rental side is sort of, you want to look at your Friday and your Saturday. So like your weekend day. Sunday doesn't really count as a weekend day, even though now it's starting to become, because people are working from home more. But it used to be Friday and Saturday. You take those 2 days, and then there's 8 of those days in the month. Those 8 days should be able to cover all of your expenses and your debt service for the month. Now, with how competitive things have gotten now, that you might want to add Sunday back in there. Like,
is that because of the price of properties are going up? Is that what you're saying? Okay, got it.
Yeah. So there's that. Another way is just underwrite it as a long-term rental and see if you're comfortable with, if the property wasn't a short-term rental, would it be able to command what your expenses are and still cash flow maybe a couple $100? Again, that's worst case. And then on top of that, we just look at occupancy rates. I've been managing them for about 5 years now, and I haven't seen occupancy drop. Even the mountain markets are not, they're seasonal, but what I've seen is during the winter, when things get colder, the property becomes the attraction, where people want to get in a cabin in the woods and sort of disconnect a little bit, but at the same time still have access to like Netflix and the internet. But during the winter, it becomes the attraction, and then during the summer, it still draws people, but it's like you're also they're visiting the city. Here, we're known for our breweries, our hiking trails. The Biltmore Estate is here. So we look at, I would say my occupancy, we probably underwrite at like a 70% occupancy, but when you're picturing investors, you want to see what your break-even occupancy is going to be. So like right now we sit about 35 to 40% on a break-even occupancy. So there's your profit. It's like, if you can, not worst case scenario, but like conservatively 70% occupancy, your break-even number for all your expenses and debt service is 40%. Your profit is that 30% in the middle. So
I love it. It. That's super helpful. And I appreciate you going through that. What role has mindset played for you, and what role does mindset play in your success?
It's huge, man. When you first start out in any type of venture, and this is sort of just going a little bit broader, stepping outside of real estate, it's you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're capable of. And what's better than what's very interesting about achieving your goals is sometimes they happen way quicker than you, once you start putting the time in and putting these deals together, stepping back into real estate, and things start moving, you realize how quickly you can sort of achieve some of your goals. And that's sort of what happened in the beginning, where I had like a goal of doing 30, and I thought 30 was 5-10 years in the future. And it's like, we're just doing one project right now is 40 at minimum. So it's like mindset's huge. A lot of people who like will hop onto YouTube. I'm one of these people. It's like, hop onto YouTube, join a mentorship, join a group coaching program, or some sort of course. They'll skip the mindset videos. And there's a reason why the mindset videos are the very first videos in these courses. It's the reason why we're talking about it right now. Is mindset. Mindset's very important. It's what you fall back on when things are not going to go your way, because it's going to happen some of the times. And then just understanding that as long as you have like your contingencies in place, it usually works out. You have to be confident in your abilities. Is what I'm trying to say. If you're not confident in your abilities, just make sure that you have someone either in your corner that can help mentor you through, or you just have the resources. Say like, I mean, YouTube's such a phenomenal free resource for everyone. I mean, I have a free YouTube channel that I track all my projects through and just teach what I'm talking about right now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man, and I also feel that mindset is also critical because sometimes we accomplish goals quicker than we ever thought, and we accomplish the wrong goals or we climbed the wrong tree because we weren't aware of, we were trying to heal some wounds that we weren't aware of in an external capacity that doesn't really serve, who we want to become. And so the question is, how are we connecting to what is true to us? And also, how do we bounce back? Like you said, how do we bounce back when we meet adversity? What's our emotional home that we live in when things knock us off course? Because, man, this is a journey that it continuously knocks us off course. And the question is, all right, well, how are you bouncing back? How are you reacting? How are you growing? And how are you setting yourself up for the next battle, the next challenge? How are you evolving as a human being? And I just feel like the mindset piece is critical.
And what's also important too, and it's like what you just said about like sometimes getting knocked off course is like exactly what you needed. Like it
Yes.
might throw you on a different course that you weren't even expecting to be on. Um, yeah, that's big. It's like you might not realize it when you're going through maybe one of the worst days of your life professionally, but you might just been thrown towards a direction that is going to be way better for you than what you were just going. And sometimes the deals that you wanted to work out the most in real estate are usually sometimes the deals that you sort of get saved when they fall through. Like you look back at it 2-3 years and you're like, wow, good thing I didn't purchase that property because
Hmm.
this is where it's at now, or this is what ended up happening. So
Yeah, thank you for
you
that
never
reminder.
know.
Personally, we just had a deal that fell apart literally yesterday. So
Yeah.
appreciate that reminder selfishly myself. But, it's a good reminder for all of us. But man, this is a long game. It's a long journey. But I appreciate this conversation. This has been super enlightening, Alex, and look forward to continuing the dialogue, but continuing to support you along your journey and see where you take this thing, man. It's very exciting. But I want to transition to the rapid fire section of the podcast. It's called the Rare Air Questionnaire. It's all about being uncommon. I have a few questions for you before we wrap. First of all, you got a beautiful bookshelf behind you, so I got to ask you about books.
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
two or three of the most impactful books that you've read over the past few years?
Yeah, there's this one and then there's one right here too. But
I love it.
I already mentioned one of them, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Huge. Just a really, no matter if you're in real estate, whatever you're in, whoever's listening, it's like it's just a good way to block out your schedule. If families literally your number one thing, that you can literally take those principles and just put them into, hey, like this is how much time I want to spend with my family, whatever it is. So I'd say One Thing. Creature from Jekyll Island is a book I started recommending more.
Game changer.
Game changer. For we just talked about mindset. That will, if you're a real estate professional or any type of investor, you owe it to yourself to understand how money works. And that, besides the last couple chapters get a little wonky, but like get a little woo woo, but the history of money and the Federal Reserve and the world banking system, it's not a conspiracy book. I picked it up thinking it was a conspiracy book. No, there's about 30 pages, or sorry, 80 pages of references in that back of that book just on
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah. So Creature from Jekyll Island, phenomenal book, probably one of the best books I've read. And then
Same here.
yeah, yeah. And then the last book I'd recommend, which I'd recommend stacking with The One Thing, is The 12-Week Year.
Oh yeah.
Is That's another really good book. If you put the principles of The One Thing, which sort of bleed into the 12-week year, those two books together will completely supercharge your results. Because like outside of my, like what I've realized sometimes, what's even more powerful than mindset is if you can commit to sticking to a schedule, like, hey, what do I need to do today? Or what do I need to do this week? Like sometimes like the calendar helps with the mindset piece if you're sort of like digging in the trenches and stuff. So
Yeah, and I almost feel like that might be the pattern from a military background that lends itself super well to being an investor, entrepreneur in real estate. Is you almost have this framework, this structure
right.
that allows you to then kind of bring your talents to without overwhelming yourself.
Right. And the 12-week year also sort of plays into what I talked about earlier, is like you realize how quickly you can actually achieve your goals. And that book gives you the framework to do that.
Yeah, big shout out to Brian Moran, former
Yeah, yeah.
guest of Elevate Podcast as well. But man, I tell you what, the creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin, that book is unbelievable. I could not put that book down. I could not recommend it enough to the listeners. So definitely go pick that up. But we'll put
And
links in the show notes. That's
it's
where the listeners
very
can find
it's
it.
very pertinent to what happened in the last couple of years with all the money that got printed. It even solidified everything that was talked about in that book.
It couldn't be more relevant. It couldn't. There's
Accurate, yeah.
nothing more relevant, honestly, and in this day and age than that read in the history of the Federal Reserve. So, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
What's the biggest way that you elevate your life on a daily basis, Alex?
I practice the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod every morning. I wake up at different times throughout the day. Sometimes, like I'm a bit of a night owl, so I'll stay up until like, especially now I have the YouTube channel, like probably staying up until like 2 or 3, just working on that if I feel motivated. So, but no matter what time I wake up, like doing the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod is one thing that sort of keeps me sharp. And I spend maybe 10-15 minutes on it every morning. So it's not like I'm spending an hour or something, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. What's the biggest way that you elevate others around you?
Just understanding that it's very easy to look at like the way you've lived and the experiences you've had. It's very easy to judge other people based off of the opinions they might have. Say like, I mean, the easiest way to see it is through social media, through the different news channels, especially again what happened in the last couple of years. It's very easy to judge people that have different mindsets than you, or different ways. But you need to understand that those people have lived a certain life, and like everyone has lived a certain life and has had their own experiences that has shaped their opinions. So I think that's a really good way to sort of elevate people, is understanding there's different ways of looking at things. And when you're coming from the military, it's one way of thinking. So
Yeah.
it's very, very, very important to understand other views and stuff.
I
And you
think
see
that we
that,
can all do better at that,
right,
have more
right.
perspective, that, your little perspective is one, but there's 8 billion people in this planet.
Right. And I mean, for people who travel internationally or live internationally or travel internationally, you see it. You see everyone has
Yes.
different values and morals and everything. So,
Yeah.
and different
Thank
things
you,
that
man.
motivate them. Yeah.
That's an awesome reminder. But Alex, man, I want to acknowledge you, obviously, for sharing so much wisdom in the short-term rental and development space, which is super enlightening and very exciting in terms of the way that we can apply that thinking, whether we want to expand into that capacity as an investor, or whether we want to apply some of that thinking to our investment portfolio if we're involved in a different asset class. But I also want to acknowledge you for your commitment to your own personal development, your commitment to growing as an individual, your commitment to focusing on one thing, and sharing that with so many people, man. This is a lot of fun, Alex. I really appreciate you being on Elevate Podcast. Is there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with Elevate Nation today?
Oh no, just stick to your goals, write them down, look at them every day. Like I keep referencing the one thing, but literally sit down at night and figure out what the 1 to 3 things you have to do the next day. Don't focus on anything until those things are done, and then everything will get easier. It's people try to complicate that type of stuff, but it's really that simple. And is figure out what you need to do. Your plan's going to change, so look at it every single day, and you'll be surprised of how quickly you can get to your goals, man.
I love it, man. I love it. And tell the listeners where they can find you, Alex.
Yeah, easiest way is through my website, Sargon Investments, SargonInvestments. And my YouTube channel's on there. If people are listening that want to invest with me, they can go through our investor portal that's on our website and schedule. And then from there, we get their contact info and we can schedule a call, and they'll talk directly to me about their investing goals. We're pretty flexible with the deals that we're offering. Right now the big guy is what we're focused on. But we always have properties in the pipeline. And then also if people are listening and want to do it themselves, my YouTube channel does a really good job of sort of detailing some of the little nitty gritty type stuff when it comes to short-term rental and just overall real estate information. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, as usual, I'll put links in the show notes as where the listeners can find you, Alex. But really appreciate you again, and look forward to continuing the dialogue. And we'll talk to you soon, man.
Beauty. Thanks, Tyler.
Elevate Nation. What a fun conversation with Alex Jarbo. I don't know about you, but wow, I learned a lot today. And there's a lot to say about the opportunities in short-term rentals. I mean, you think about a lot of people who are trying to get into real estate investing are like, oh my gosh, the barriers of entry are so tall. And of course, that's true in many different asset classes. But you know what? I think Alex is giving us an opportunity and giving many of those folks an opportunity to say, well, what is my excuse now? Because if the barriers of entry are significantly lower, there are significantly more opportunities to create an entrance in the space. Why not take that opportunity? So I just think that was exciting. And, for myself, and I know that many of the other listeners are, established real estate investors who are, really growing or expanding their portfolio in different asset classes. There's still a lot to be learned from this conversation. So I hope that you enjoyed that half as much as I did. And I want to encourage you to identify what are your top 1, 2, or 3 takeaways. Was it, the management approach? Was it the way that he's evaluating the marketplace? Was it the way that he's sourcing deals? Was it the mindset thought process that he shared with us? Was it the constant evolution of, his focus, the evolution of, thinking about, hey, well, one thing is a way for me to continue to move forward. What were your takeaways? What were your distinctions? I want to encourage you to jot those down, whether you put it in your notes on your phone or put it on a notepad. What are your top distinctions? And I also want to encourage you to re-listen to the show. If you need to find those distinctions, go for that. And when you listen twice, you learn twice as much. And so I want to encourage you to do that. I also want to encourage you to have a discussion with someone else about what you learned today and, break things down. Talk about what didn't make sense to you, what made the most sense to you. How might this help you evolve or expand your own investment thesis or your own investment strategy or your own approach to designing your life? So I want to encourage you to have that discussion. I also want to encourage you to make a commitment to take action and to take massive action, because ultimately all of this was for naught if we don't move forward. And of course, action may be a behavior change. It may be a way of thinking change. It may be a way of focusing your time, your attention, your efforts. It may be a way of, changing your habits, your behaviors in terms of your morning routine or a book that you want to read. I mean, there's just so much here. So I want to encourage you to take that action today and commit to that massive action. Until next time, Elevate Nation, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit elevatepod.com.